I'm pleased to announce today the launch and the membership of Canada's new Ministerial Advisory Council on Rights, Equality and Inclusion. It will be chaired by the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, Marc Miller. The Council has a clear mission to combat racism and hate in all their forms, and to guide the Government of Canada as part of our efforts to build a fairer, more just, more inclusive society. And I am directing that the first responsibility of that Council is to address anti-Semitism.
That is Prime Minister Mark Carney's announcement on Monday, as you heard him say, appointing a Ministerial Advisory Council on Rights, Equality and Inclusion, which will be chaired by Marc Miller, the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, who is on the line. Minister, thank you so much for being with us today. Look, I wanted to start a conversation that we could have here with saying, you know, we've been talking about something needing to be done as far as anti-Semitism is concerned, but most comments I have heard post the Prime Minister's remarks at a synagogue the other night have not been very positive. So let me start with that first of all, and I think the obvious question, I've heard a few people ask this, is why not having, made that announcement, why not have done that in Parliament as opposed to going to a synagogue in Toronto and doing it?
Well, it's a good question and probably a valid critique. I don't agree with it necessarily, Aaron, but, doing it in a temple or synagogue was, I think, an important, more than symbolic sign that he is continuing to take the concerns of the Jewish community, and indeed all Canadians, seriously when it comes to scourge of anti-Semitism. We are failing Jewish Canadians in this country, as much as there's been a lot of effort deployed to combat anti-Semitism. It has only grown, and you can point your finger to lots of things, including very polarizing war in Gaza, but it's a multitude of factors, and at the end of the day, you can't escape that truth that we need to do more. The National Unity Committee that he put forward deals and should deal with the issues of our time, including, importantly, anti-Semitism, but we'll be tasked with other ones. But this was part of an announcement to deal with the growing hate, including underscoring a number of laws that we've passed, including Bill C-9, which will make it illegal to protest in front of fair locations, community centers where these events occur, making sure that people are held to account with respect to hate speech. Significant investments in the last budget in protecting those fair locations, including synagogues and temples. So that the reason and the spirit behind it, which I support, but it is by no means an exhaustive list of the measures that we need to take. And I'd also say if the standard for this committee is to eradicate anti-Semitism, I think that is a failure by design. We shouldn't purport to do that, but we have to give it our level best as a country to continue to discuss these issues, have open conversations, and move to make sure that the Jews in Canada can be safe. And that, in some cases, is not the case today.
Well, it would seem to me as you say that, one way to keep people safe is to actually arrest people who violate laws that already exist. And I think people point now to the fact that in that statement by the Prime Minister, this just seems like we're passing the buck. Yes, you're setting up a council. Yes, you're going to look at this. We already know it exists, and we already know for the most part who's involved in some of the hate incidents that have already taken place and continue to take place. Why not simply say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We know where the problem is. We know who's committing the problem for the most part. Let's go ahead and institute some action rather than sitting down and forming a council. What's that going to achieve?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think we can walk and chew gum and arrest people that are breaking the law at the same time in a country like Canada that is not without complexity, meaning, and we've lived that, you and I living in Montreal, where municipal authorities need to be able to implement criminal laws in the way that, including the MUC and the police in Montreal. That is key, but it is something that we must do and make sure that we are doing. Enforcement of those laws is done by provincial authorities in Quebec, but across the country, and it needs to get better. There's no question about it. I don't want to, at the same time, pretend that people don't have a right to protest. It's an important feature of a democracy like Canada, and in fact, it's a way to vent. And protest should not are not made to make people feel comfortable. But there is a line that cannot and should not be drawn. So to your point, this is not uncomplex, but we have to actually act a little more thoughtfully in making sure that people are being held to account for instances of when they break the law, including the most egregious forms of anti-Semitism and hate.
I will ask another question that's being asked. Why in the Prime Minister's announcement? I appreciate you're not the Prime Minister and, you're having to answer these questions, but people are asking, why did he simply not call out? We know, for example, right, the Jewish population in this country represents roughly 1% of it, yet over 70% of the hate crimes committed have been against it, right? Why not simply call it radical Islam, recognizing that that's been the issue in making that announcement? It
has been the source of that, including radical views coming from people that are distorting Islam. That is absolutely unquestionable. I don't know what I honestly can't speak to what the Prime Minister may or may not have said, but it happens to be an important part of the equation that we have to deal with in the way we deal with these things as a country. No question about it. But I'm not going to parse through what the Prime Minister said. I think his statement was very strong, and I think it denoted the seriousness of the situation.
Okay. I want you to hear this reaction. Melissa Lantsman was on CJAD yesterday, and obviously, she is, of course, the deputy opposition leader, and she had this to say, and I want you to react to this. So take a listen to this.
What an abject failure at a time where we needed to see leadership. It would have been better if he said nothing at all.
Well, first, the Conservative... No person, no individual, no Conservative has the monopoly of thought on the Jewish community or its support for that matter. It is a nuanced support that varies from party to party. Melissa makes it a specialty to spew stuff like that. She's accused me of trying to ban the Torah, which is complete horse crap. So it's hard to take some of her words seriously. The Conservatives do get sensitive anytime they feel the Jewish community supports any of our policies. I think we have to stand on principle here, Aaron, as Canadians, and say enough is enough. This is not a party thing. It is about every single Canadian standing up and saying no to anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, partisan politics is a feature of this, and sadly, Melissa, who I appreciate personally, is taking the slant, and I think that's unfortunate for the community.
Last question, which is just, now you're chairing this particular committee, this group. What are you expecting will come out of this? And is this one of those things that, this is the announcement made by the Prime Minister, and now we're not going to have to talk about this anymore because it becomes a job of the council that's been set up?
No, and I think that's important, Aaron, because the reason I agreed to chair it is because I take this seriously. We could have chosen someone who's not a parliamentarian, who's not responsible for these portfolios in Parliament, and treated it the way you've described. I think that would be a cynical approach. Let's not expect standards that any committee could not meet, and at the same time recognize that there are other measures being taken. But I do expect council members to be active. I may even think that the Prime Minister might himself be active in it, because it was his idea to make sure that we had a committee that was dealing with issues of our time, focusing on national unity, and not the previous iteration of what we had, if you recall, which was a secretariat dealing with anti-Semitism and a secretariat dealing with Islamophobia, and the net result was more polarization, sadly, despite the good intentions of the people that perhaps were heading it. And so let's give it a chance. It isn't, again, the only solution, but it is one element of a really important strategy to make sure Jews feel safe in this country.
What is another solution then beyond this?
You mentioned it before. I think we have to pass our bill combating hatred, entitled C9. It's currently in the Senate. I have hopes that it will pass. It'll make people safer in the places that they pray, making sure that we get our budgetary amounts into community members that support those places of prayer, so community safety funds, and making sure that we continue to have a dialogue in this country that isn't based on, unfortunately, what we've seen in the last few years, which is a very polarized dynamic, fueled in part by the war in Gaza.
Minister, I always appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron.
Pride is like love. You feel it in your heart. iHeartRadio. iHeartRadio, Canada's #1 streaming app for radio and podcasts, including iHeart Pride Canada, your favorite hits, and must-have party bangers, plus personalized and curated playlists like Back in the Day Pride.
Come together, celebrate love.
Take Pride with you, anytime, anywhere. Just ask your smart speaker to play iHeart Pride Canada. Stream us on your phone or listen now at iHeartRadio.ca.